Good evening and welcome to Skyline. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Traitor. And let me begin with a very simple question here. How quickly can the entire world change? Well, sometimes all it takes is one meeting between two leaders. Sometimes it takes one missile. Sometimes it takes one unexpected statement, and within hours, global politics take a completely different direction. Tonight, we will connect all these stories, explain why they matter, and tell you what they could mean for the future of global politics. So let's start with it. Wait, can one meeting between two leaders create problem between two neighboring countries? Well, that's exactly the question being asked tonight. Turkish President Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he recently met the US President Mr. Donald Trump during the NATO summit. On the surface, it looked like a routine diplomatic meeting between two important NATO partners. But inside Iran, the reaction has been anything but routine. A senior Iranian lawmaker, he strongly criticized President Erdogan, accusing him of choosing Washington over regional solidarity. Well, the criticism became even stronger because the meeting took place during Iran's mourning period for Ali Khamenei, their ex-leader. Several hardline voices in Tehran argued that the timing of the meeting it was deeply insensitive and politically provocative. Now think why this matters. Turkey and Iran are neighbors. They share trade relationship, energy cooperation, and regional interest. But despite that, the two countries have often found themselves supporting opposite sides in major West Asian conflict. Well, they have disagreed over Syria, over Iraq, over the South Caucasus, and regional security issues. While both the nations want greater influence in West Asia, they often compete rather than cooperate. In the meantime, President Erdogan's growing engagement with Mr. Trump, it is now adding another layer to that competition. Well, for Turkey, maintaining strong relationship with Washington remains strategically important here. Well, as a NATO member, Ankara depends on defense cooperation with the United States and other Western allies. Turkey is also trying to strengthen its position inside NATO at a time when Europe is facing growing security challenges. However, Iran views the United States as its biggest geopolitical rival. Every high-profile meeting between the regional leaders and Washington is carefully watched in Tehran. Iranian leaders believe that such meetings could reshape regional alliances and weaken Iran's influence across West Asia. And that is why this latest criticism it has attracted international attention. Well, it is no longer about one meeting. It is about trust, it is about regional influence, it is about strategic partnership, and it is about the future balance of power in one of the world's most volatile regions. And yes, while political leaders exchanged handshakes and diplomatic messages at the NATO summit, another emergency was unfolding thousands of kilometers away over the Arabian Sea. Can you imagine a routine cargo flight carrying essential goods between two nations? The weather looks manageable, communication with air traffic control is pretty normal. And then suddenly the pilots report an emergency. Minutes later, the aircraft disappears from the radar. Well, that is exactly what happened to a Pakistan-registered Boeing 737 cargo aircraft traveling from Sharjah to Karachi. According to aviation authorities, the crew declared an in-flight navigation emergency while flying over the Arabian Sea near Pakistan's southern coastline. Flight tracking data reportedly showed unusual altitude changes before all the communication with the aircraft was lost. Soon afterwards, search and rescue teams were deployed near the Gwadar-Omara coastline in Balochistan. Now, think about what happens when an aircraft disappears over the sea. Every passing minute becomes critical. Rescue teams have deal with the rough weather, they have deal with changing sea current, limited visibility, and massive search area. Finding even small pieces of debris in open water, it was very, very difficult for them. But for the families of the 5 crew members, the uncertainty, it is heartbreaking. Well, every phone call brings some sort of hope for them. Every passing hour brings more anxiety to them. In the meantime, investigators will eventually try to answer several important questions once they find it themselves. The questions like, did the aircraft suffer a technical failure? Or perhaps, was there a navigation system that malfunctioned? Another important question, did weather condition play a role, or did another emergency force the crew just to declare distress? Until investigators recover the aircraft and its flight records, these questions may remain unanswered. But incidents like these also remind us that aviation remains one of the safest forms of transport in the world. Thousands of aircraft take off and land safely every single day. But when something goes wrong, every second matters, and rescue operations become an international race against the time. And yes, while search teams scan the Arabian Sea, hoping to locate the missing aircraft, Mr. Donald Trump was making another statement that immediately grabbed global attention across the globe like always. Mr. Donald Trump has once again brought Greenland into the center of global politics. That's right, speaking during the NATO summit, President Trump repeated his belief that Greenland should never come under the American control. In fact, he argued that the Arctic island is strategically important for the United States and linked the issue to America's long-standing military commitments in Europe. Mr. Trump also suggested that Washington has spent a lot of resources protecting the European allies and deserve greater cooperation on issues affecting the American security. Now, this was not the very first time when Mr. Trump has spoken about Greenland, of course. It's his unfulfilled desire. His earlier comments on acquiring the Greenland, it generated global headlines, and they were firmly rejected by both Denmark and Greenland's leader. But despite those objections, the strategic importance of Greenland has continued to grow. Think about why Greenland matters so much here. The Arctic is rapidly becoming one of the world's most important geopolitical regions. Climate change is opening new shipping routes. Countries are competing for access to valuable natural resources. Military activity in Arctic, it is increasing, and global powers including the United States, Russia and China are paying much closer attention to the region than ever before. Now, Greenland sits at the center of many of these strategic calculations. Well, its location makes it an important resource for missile defense system, Arctic surveillance and military logistics. The US already operates a major military installation on the island, making Greenland an important part of America's northern defense strategy. Now, for Denmark and Greenland, the sovereignty that is not open for any sort of discussion. Their position remains absolutely clear. Greenland's future belongs to its own people, and that is why every news statement on this issue, it quickly becomes international news, because today's competition is no longer limited to land, sea and air. Well, it is expanding into the Arctic, where geography, security and global power are becoming increasingly interconnected. Now, from Arctic geopolitics, our next story takes us to the heart of New York City, where a major emergency forced hundreds of people to leave one of Manhattan's busiest areas. New York City is known as a city that never sleeps. Every day, millions of people walk through its busy streets. Thousands of workers enter office towers. In fact, tourists visit famous landmarks. Schools remain full of children. Life moves at an incredible pace. But sometimes that pace comes to a sudden stop. And that's exactly what happened in Midtown Manhattan. A major emergency unfolded after structural concerns were reported at a high-rise redevelopment project. According to the New York Fire Department, officials received reports of falling bricks, buckling support columns, and sagging floor inside the building. As a precaution, emergency crew immediately sealed off several surrounding streets and ordered large-scale evacuation while engineers rushed to assess the whole structure. Now, think about this. Manhattan is one of the most densely populated places in the world. Every office tower, every apartment building and every construction project sits very close to one another. So when structural concerns are reported inside even one building, authorities cannot afford to take chances here. In the meantime, police officers quickly cleared nearby streets, firefighters secured the whole area, emergency response teams established safety zones. Traffic was diverted, public transport service in that area were affected, and hundreds of workers were safely evacuated before engineers entered the building. In the meantime, New York City Mayor Mr. Zohran Mamdani, he later addressed the media alongside Governor Kathy. Both the leaders assured the residents that public safety remained the highest priority and confirmed that engineers would continue inspecting the building before anyone would be allowed to enter. Now, fortunately, there were no injuries that were reported, but the whole incident once again highlighted the responsibility that was involved in maintaining aging infrastructure while new redevelopment projects continue across major cities. In the meantime, for millions of people living in large metropolitan area, safety inspections are very often invisible. Yet they remain one of the most important part of urban life because sometimes preventing a disaster is just as important as responding to one. And yes, while emergency crew worked to secure one of New York's busiest neighborhood, another moment from the NATO summit was dominating social media around the globe. International summits are usually remembered for important agreements, major speeches, historic meetings, or maybe breakthrough decisions. But sometimes one unexpected moment becomes bigger than the summit itself. And this is exactly what happened during the NATO summit dinner in Ankara. As global leaders arrived at the presidential palace, cameras captured a brief interaction between French President Mr. Emmanuel Macron and Turkey's First Lady Emin Erdogan. During the greeting, many people on social media claimed that Emin Erdogan appeared to pull back before what they believed was an attempt by President Macron to kiss her hand. In the meantime, French First Lady Brigitte Macron was standing beside him as the greeting continued. Within minutes, short video clips spread rapidly across social media platforms, triggering widespread discussion and different interpretation of the interaction. Now think about this. Diplomatic protocols differ from one country to another. Every handshake, every greeting, and every gesture can carry cultural meaning. What appears completely normal in one country may be interpreted very differently elsewhere. And that is why international leaders receive detailed diplomatic briefing before attending any global summit. Well, despite that preparation, unexpected moments still happen. And today, in the age of smartphones and social media, even a greeting lasting only a few seconds maybe, it can become a worldwide talking point. In the meantime, supporters called the moment insignificant, but critics analyzed every frame of the video. Experts reminded people that short video clips often fail to capture the complete context of a diplomatic interaction. Whatever the interpretation may be, one thing is definitely clear. The whole incident once again demonstrated how modern diplomacy now unfolds not only inside meeting rooms, but also across millions of mobile phone screens around the globe. And yes, while social media debated a diplomatic greeting, a far more dangerous situation was developing in one of the world's most sensitive maritime regions. Every single day, hundreds of commercial ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz. They transport oil, natural gas, food supplies, industrial goods, and cargo worth billions of dollars. Well, it is one of the world's busiest and most strategically important shipping route. But today, that vital corridor has once again become the center of military tension. Ladies and gentlemen, according to reports, the LNG carrier Al-Rakayat, which was sailing towards Gujarat, India, suffered a serious emergency after reportedly being stuck near the Strait of Hormuz. After that, distress communication from the vessel described heavy smoke inside the engine room, loss of engine power, and complete loss of steering. Emergency messages from the crew prompted an emergency rescue response as the whole situation worsened. The whole incident has drawn even greater attention because Qatar has reportedly blamed Iran for this whole attack, marking one of the strongest public accusations made by Doha during the ongoing regional crisis. Shortly afterwards, reports said that the United States launched another round of strikes targeting Iranian coastal military position as tension continued to escalate. Now wait, think about why this matters. The Strait of Hormuz is far more than a narrow stretch of water, right? It is world's energy lifeline. A significant share of global oil and liquefied natural gas passes through this particular route every single year. So any disruption, it affects much more than ships. It can influence global energy prices, it can influence the international trade, shipping, insurance, and the economies of countries thousands of kilometers away. As long as talking about India, then the region holds particular importance because the country imports a large share of its energy requirement from the Gulf nation. So any prolonged disruption, it could increase transportation costs and place additional pressure on global energy market. And that is why governments across the globe are watching developments in Gulf very, very closely. Because let's be honest here, one incident at sea, it can quickly become an international crisis. When people think about natural disasters in China, they usually think of earthquakes, floods, or maybe typhoons. But this time it was a tornado. And within minutes, entire neighborhoods were left in ruins. Well, a powerful tornado outbreak struck parts of Hubei province, leaving at least 11 people dead and hundreds other injured. Well, the violent storm swept across a lot of cities, in fact, bringing destructive winds, thunderstorm, and tornadoes. Homes were destroyed, factories suffered heavy damage, and vehicles, they were overturned, with public infrastructure that was badly affected as emergency teams rushed to rescue stranded residents. Now think about this. Tornadoes, they are among the most unpredictable natural disaster. Unlike hurricanes, which can often be tracked days in advance, tornadoes can form within minutes, giving people a very little time to react. In the meantime, residents described hearing an extremely loud roaring sound before powerful winds ripped through the buildings, uprooted trees, and threw debris hundreds of meters into the air. Emergency workers have been working around the clock to rescue the survivors, clear the damaged roads, and restore electricity and communication networks. In the meantime, local authorities are also assessing the full extent of the destruction as thousands of families begin rebuilding their lives. Climate experts say that extreme weather events are becoming more frequent in many parts of the globe. Whether it is flood, whether it is wildfire, it is heat wave or tornadoes, governments everywhere are facing new challenges in protecting lives and infrastructure. Well, for the people of Hubei, however, this is no longer a discussion about climate or weather. It is about rebuilding homes. It is about rebuilding communities and rebuilding lives. And yes, while China struggled against the forces of nature, the West Asian politics, it is once again witnessing a dangerous military escalation between Iran and the United States. Well, the West Asia is once again standing at a dangerous crossroads. Every military action is being answered with another. Every strike is followed by retaliation, and the risk of wider regional conflict continues to grow. Ladies and gentlemen, according to Iranian media, Iran launched a fresh round of missile and drone attacks targeting several US military facilities following recent American airstrike inside Iran. Well, reports claim that installations linked to the United States 5th Fleet in Bahrain and Ali Al Salim Air Base in Kuwait, they were among the intended targets. Iranian media also reported that an American MQ-9 drone has been shot down over Bushehr province. Now earlier, the United States carried out another large-scale military operation targeting dozens of Iranian military sites. In fact, according to the US officials, the strike focused on coastal missile system, air defense site, in fact, command center and facilities believed to support attacks on commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Here, Washington said that the objective was to reduce Iran's ability to threaten the international maritime traffic. Now, think why this matters. This is no longer just a dispute between two nations. Well, military bases across the Gulf are on high alert. In the meantime, commercial ships are changing their routes. Well, airlines are monitoring the regional airspace. Global energy markets are reacting to every new development that is there. In fact, another important decision has also added to the tension in the Middle East. The United States has reportedly provoked an arrangement that has allowed Iran to openly sell the oil under an interim understanding. Though Iran has strongly criticized the decision, calling it a violation of previous commitments and accusing Washington of increasing pressure instead of reducing the tension. Well, diplomatic efforts continue, but every new missile launch, in fact, every airstrike and every military statement, that makes the whole path towards peace even more difficult for the entire world. The world is now watching very carefully because any further escalation could affect not only the West Asia but also global trade, energy supplies, and international security. As tensions continue to threaten one of the world's most important energy corridor, another major oil-producing nation, it is quietly preparing for the near future. For decades, the Strait of Hormuz has been one of the world's most important energy routes. In fact, a large share of the world's oil export passes through this narrow corridor every single day. But repeated conflicts have exposed one major weakness. If the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted, global energy supplies are immediately affected. And that is why Saudi Arabia is now reportedly exploring a major expansion of its Red Sea oil pipeline network. Ladies and gentlemen, according to reports, Riyadh is studying ways to transport more crude oil through the Red Sea instead of depending heavily on the Strait of Hormuz. The proposal it is still in its early stages, and it would require significant investment, cooperation with regional partners, and several years of construction before becoming operational. Now think about what this really means. It cannot be simply an infrastructure project, right? It is a long-term strategic decision. Here, Saudi Arabia is trying to reduce the risks that are created by repeated military tension in the Gulf. Well, by extending alternative export route, the kingdom hopes to protect its energy export even during the time of conflict in West Asia. The whole proposal, it also highlights an important reality here. Ladies and gentlemen, modern geopolitics that is no longer fought only with missiles or military bases. In today's modern times, it is fought with a lot of things, including pipelines, including ports, in fact, including shipping lanes and energy infrastructure that have become equally important strategic assets. Countries are now investing not only in defense, but also in supply chain security. Well, because whosoever controls reliable energy route, that particular nation gains an important economic advantage. Whether the project moves forward or not, one thing is definitely clear. Well, the recent tension in the Gulf are forcing the countries to rethink how energy reaches the rest of the world. A political meeting in Ankara, a military strike in the Gulf, a natural disaster in China, or an energy decision in Saudi Arabia can all have consequences far beyond their borders. And that is why understanding global events, it has never been more important. Well, thank you for watching Skyline. I'm Dhriti Atri. Stay informed, stay cautious, and I'll see you in the next episode.